UFC 305 just took place not too long ago. It's been literally a few minutes. I'm quite tired, but this was quite the event, and I just kind of want to give my ratings and my reactions. That's right, ratings as well. I'll go over that. I thought it was a good card, and overall, it was somewhat like I expected, but there were a few decisions and things like that that kind of surprised me. And also, I just want to have you keep in mind that this is just main card, so I'm not looking at prelims or early prelims or anything like that. I was gonna maybe release like a prediction video. I was gonna do that, but as time went on, I just didn't get the chance to. So maybe in the next pay-per-views, I'll be looking to do that. I went 4-1 on the main card, so there's that. So yeah, let's get straight into it. All right, just checking the mic's on. How I rate fights. So as I mentioned, this is going to be my first time kind of rating fights, not just reacting to them. And first of all, I went 4-1, like I just mentioned. So how do I rate fights? For me, it's going to be, I like to compare Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo and Edwards versus Usman too. So McGregor versus Aldo was a 5 out of 5, like perfect fight. Whereas Edwards versus Usman 2 was a 2 out of 5, despite the fact that it was like one of the greatest knockouts of all time. For me, I kind of rate it based on if I'm going to recommend you a fight. With McGregor Aldo, it's literally like 10 seconds. It's a phenomenal knockout. It's crazy. It's once in a lifetime type of thing. Whereas for Edwards Usman 2, it's one of the greatest knockouts of all time, but you have to sit through a few rounds of kind of boring, nothing really going on just to get to a good knockout. So hopefully it kind of makes sense as I go through the card a bit and as I rate more events in the future. This is my first one, so maybe it's not going to be completely, my sort of idea behind it might not show as much right now, but hopefully as I continue to do this, it does. So without further ado, let's go straight into the first fight of the night in the main card. And that's Carlos Prates versus Li Jingliang. I'm giving it a 4 out of 5, and I'm not going to spend too much time on these first two fights because I have quite a few thoughts to give on the later fights. But fighting nerds, I mean, they've kind of taken over the sport in a short amount of time. Jingliang goes out cold, first time in his career, by the way. He came back from a long layoff. The last one, I think, was August of 2023. Not even August of 2023. It was April, I think, versus that one guy, Daniel Rodriguez. And that was a split decision, a really weird decision at that. And Prates has become the first guy, as I mentioned, to KO Li Jingliang. Great knockout in the second round. Decent fight, right? With a really nasty out cold KO. So go out of your way to watch this one for sure. Then we move on to Rosenstruck versus Tuivasa. I'm going to give it 2.5 out of 5. So maybe the worst split decision of all time. I'm thinking on the level of like Chito Vera, Corey Sandhagen type of decision, because I just don't see how you can give Tuivasa 30-27. I really don't. Even 29-28 would be pushing it. 30-27, I know the judge did do that, ended up getting relieved of the night, so he didn't judge any other fights, and rightfully so. It was a terrible decision. And two big guys swinging, like I mentioned. If you like big sweaty men throwing big meaty hooks, shout out to Lucas Tracy. Go watch it. Other than that, I think it was just completely average. We move on to Gamrot versus Hooker. So I should probably mention the past two fights I got correctly. This fight I didn't. This is the only fight on the main card I didn't get correctly. And I was actually leaning towards Hooker for a reason. So first, this was 4 out of 5. I think from start to finish, this was fight of the night. And I just want to say, I don't think this was a robbery. I know some people are saying it was a robbery for Hooker, or Gamrot got robbed. Here's the thing. So I gave Gamrot round 1, right? He got dropped, sure, but he cut Hooker open, and he had more, I would say, big moments. Hooker had just one knockdown, and it wasn't even a really bad knockdown. Gamrot immediately got back up, started trading with him. So I think you have to give him round 1, round 2, arguably Gamrot. It kind of came down to round 3. And what I don't like about Gamrot is that he was coasting that entire round. His takedowns were horrendous. His defensive striking was good, but I mean, you just kind of you have to put your foot on the pedal. When you're in a very close fight and you're at the last round, you have to give the judges an exclamation mark. You have to show them that I won this fight, and at the last 10 seconds of the fight, Hooker threw a really nice shot, and it was the biggest shot of the fight, or excuse me, of the round, not the fight. And Hooker won. It was that simple. And I'm shocked that Gamrot just had no oomph in him in that last round. Again, his defensive boxing, he was doing good on the back foot, and that's one thing I want to mention, that in this fight, Hooker's takedown defense, he has an 80% takedown defense going into this fight. That's kind of why I was leaning towards him anyways, but the fact that he's been off for, I think, like a year or two, maybe 2 years, with the broken arm as well, and he's getting a bit older, he's been through wars, versus Gamrot, who's younger. But one thing about Gamrot I want to say is I just don't know if his heart's there. And I say that because I don't think he beat Sarukian. I actually thought that was a robbery. I had very clearly, I had like 4-1 Sarukian. Then he gets absolutely demolished by Benil. And he's had a couple of impressive performances. I think he got like dropped by RDA as well, or got hurt by RDA. He has a skill, and his striking is the best it's ever looked in this fight. His wrestling is real good. We saw how good Dustin Poirier's wrestling was against Makhachev, and a lot of Poirier's wrestling training was with Gamrot. But at the last round, you kind of have to push it. You have to show the judges you're willing to go the distance, and I really was confused. I was screaming at Gamrot. I was like, do something. He was shooting takedowns, and he wasn't even like trying to get them. And he would just sit there, and they were really lazy. So because of that, I don't think it was a robbery. I think Hooker gave the judges more. And when it comes to Gamrot, I'm impressed with his striking. I'm impressed with how quickly he's adapting to it. His wrestling's already really good. But this is a guy who people thought would give Makhachev issues. Makhachev would demolish this guy on the feet. And his wrestling, I mean, we saw Makhachev's takedowns against Hooker. Now, obviously, that was a while ago. Hooker is improving. Even at this point of his game. But, I'm just not really impressed by what Gamrot did in certain sequences. And hopefully he learns from this, because his striking is improving and his wrestling's already really great. He just needs to have a bit more heart. He needs to be willing to go out there and make a statement and make it ugly, per se. So, yeah, fight of the night, I think. Let's move on to the co-main event. Kai Kara France versus Steve Erceg. I give it a 4.5 out of 5. So I think that's the highest so far, and the reason I gave it higher than the knockout over Li Jingliang, simply because it's two high-ranked flyweights, and it has a direct effect on the future of the division. So I went with Kai Kara France, actually, over Steve Erceg, and my opinion was simply, I think Kai Kara France has really good boxing. He's a smaller guy, and he's quick. He's going to be faster than Erceg. And in this fight, he just looked real crisp. I mean, those stand switches, that's what led to the first knockdown. I think he came in, I think it was with the right, and then what's the word? Volk does it a lot, where he stand switches, and then he landed the left. I might have got it mixed up, but that was really, really impressive by Kai Kara France. And Erceg, I mean, he just took Pantoja to a very close decision. A lot of people felt Pantoja won. And we just see Kai Kara France absolutely obliterate him. Now, I know people are going to say, well, how bad is Pantoja really? Again, styles do make fights. And I think Kai Kara France is a lot faster than Pantoja, whereas Pantoja has maybe heavier hands. But it's hard to argue against Kara France at this point. I mean, he's very strong. And I thought he got robbed against his previous opponent, Albaziev, or I can't remember who, but I thought he got kind of robbed in that fight. So, yeah, I mean, him versus Pantoja, a big fight. A lot of people are looking forward to it. I'm pretty sure Pantoja's already beaten Kai anyways. So there's that. And, yeah, Erceg is still great. Let's not take away from what he's been able to do, how close he made it with Pantoja. But overall, this, to me, was the biggest finish of the night as far as just impressiveness goes because of that. But overall, DDP versus Israel Adesanya, 4 out of 5. Arguably the most impressive as far as the tenacity, the tenaciousness goes of it. So I had DDP winning this fight, but I have a lot I really want to talk about for this one. I can make an entire video on this, actually. So for starters, when I was rewatching some of DDP's performances, particularly the one against Whitaker, one thing that stood out to me was this guy's his distance management is atrocious. Like, it's so bad. If you go watch that fight with Whitaker, I was pausing in certain moments. If I had done my breakdown, I would have shared the images that I screenshotted. I mean, he was throwing check hooks and stuff way out of range, and Whitaker wasn't even moving out of the way. Whitaker would just stand there and it would miss. And we saw that in this fight as well. There were multiple moments where DDP threw something and Adesanya didn't even need to move. He just stood there because it didn't even come close to landing. And when we talk about DDP's knockout over Whitaker, you know what's really funny is the jab knocks him down, right? He threw a jab before that one, and the distance was so off. Whitaker, again, go rewatch that fight. Whitaker didn't even move. He just stood there. The jab missed. The second time he threw the jab, Whitaker came in like for a blitz, and DDP threw the jab. And you know what's the funniest part is that DDP, as soon as he threw the jab, he turns his back to Whitaker and he moves back, almost like he didn't even expect the jab to do much. He was expecting Whitaker to immediately counter. So as soon as he threw the jab, he was looking to cover up. So am I going to say it's a fluke? Absolutely not. But what I'm trying to say is this guy's distance management is really bad. And we saw that in this fight. But his blitz are really good. And they actually really surprised me. He was landing on Adesanya. Every time he came rushing forward with his chin in the air, he was landing. And I was wondering why Adesanya wasn't countering, but he was. He was just missing. And that's just DDP is like, DDP calls himself the luckiest fighter. He might just be, but I think there's a method to the madness. At this point, I think he's a lot faster, and his strength, you know, when a guy that big blitz, it's different when Whitaker does it because Whitaker's not known for crazy power. DDP has the power. He's a big guy, and I think he's a lot faster than might come across on TV. And I think Adesanya was going for some check hooks, going for some counterattacks, and they just weren't landing as well. But Adesanya, I mean, his body shots were adding up. I at one point I thought to myself, Adesanya might get a body kick or a like hook to the body KO, like a liver shot KO, because they were landing. But DDP's heart, and we talked about Gamrot Hooker and how I feel like Gamrot doesn't have heart. DDP is the exact opposite. Like, this is what I want to see from Gamrot, and they're kind of alike in some ways. And I actually even think they kind of look alike at the press conference. I kept thinking that they kind of fight similarly in some ways, but DDP, the difference is he just has heart, and he's a freak athlete. Whereas with Adesanya, I think he looked good, but they were both kind of sloppy. I'll just be honest. DDP just did stuff, and I was like, if you had seen my live reaction, I was just sitting back like, oh my gosh, he's going to get knocked out any second now. And with Adesanya, I was thinking he really needs to pull the trigger. He needs to learn how to pull the trigger. And people are going to say, he did so against Pereira. No, Pereira was the one who risked getting knocked out by coming in, making the fight exciting. Adesanya, the first minute of the fight out, he was pushing DDP back, and I was like, oh, this is how Adesanya wins. I was literally saying that out loud, like, okay, if Adesanya wins, this is how he does it. He pushes this guy back, he makes it ugly, and then he just kind of stops, and he goes back to fighting on the back foot, being comfortable with that. And he needs to, there were several moments where I really felt if he went for it, when he was landing those body shots, he could have maybe won. I'm not going to say, but he could have done a bit more impressive work there. It just feels like he's content with lazing around at times. And DDP shot for it. He pulled the trigger when he needed to. He was looking for the finish. And DDP, man, again, there's a method to the madness. As much as I make fun of the fact that he's very ploddy on the feet, his footwork just isn't there. He's strong. He's really strong. He's got heart. He comes forward even when he's hurt. He won't stop. And I think he has a lot more power than people give him credit for. We all know he's powerful. He might be the hardest hitter in middleweight right now. His grappling is tremendous. He said it himself. Adesanya is a really hard guy to take down. Yeah, he took down Adesanya and submitted him. If I'm not mistaken, this is the first time Adesanya's been submitted anyways, isn't it? So impressive by DDP. I think Adesanya looked good. Again, if he just learns to pull that trigger, which he doesn't really do, he could, and he's already so good, right? We all know he's technical, but he sometimes just does too much, you know. I saw a tweet once from a guy, Alexander Unleashed, I think his name is, on Twitter, and he mentioned when he was looking at Strickland versus Izzy, he said that it was basically Izzy doing not front kicks. It was him doing like question mark kicks and spinning kicks, and then you had Strickland doing 1, 1, 1, 2, teep, 1, 2. I feel like Adesanya's fundamentals aren't as strong, and he's very... He thinks too much about feints, getting the feint out and stuff like this. And it's a different middleweight division now. It's a different middleweight division. The guys are getting more and more talented each day. And at this point, I just don't know how he does against some of these newer guys. Like, at first, I thought he would beat Imavov. I don't even know at this point, because these guys are just improving, and it seems like Adesanya is willing to just stay the same. And now that I've said that, I guess I would quickly like to mention one thing, which is I feel like nowadays, especially, people are really quick to kind of go, where does this guy rank on the greatest of all time list? Right? I'm already seeing people asking where's DDP on the all time list. I very comfortably put Adesanya and Silva above him, even though he beat Adesanya. We're just talking about resume. Adesanya is still way above him. Silva's way above him. Whitaker's above him, even though he's beaten Whitaker, but he's close to Whitaker, I think. Um, Rockhold is the most disrespected middleweight of all time, so he's number 4, I think. Then you can put up maybe Forrest Griffin, I think, or is it Griffin? It was maybe somebody else. I'm getting mixed up. But DDP, just off of these 3 huge wins, Whitaker, Strickland, and Adesanya, 2 of them by finishes over guys that aren't easy to finish, I think he's already put himself at like number 6 or 7, honestly, of all time, just like that. And if he fights Strickland again and beats him, he's put himself into maybe top 5 contention. And if he gets another big win, a Chimaev or a Whitaker rematch, or a Nimavov or Brendan Allen, whoever it may be. I know Pereira's talking about moving down. I saw that. He's probably top 3. So it's really going to be interesting to see what happens next. If Pereira moves down, I don't think the UFC is going to give him that fight, but I think Dana would be more willing to give Pereira a fight with DDP at middleweight than he would at heavyweight against Tom Aspinall. That would be a really interesting fight. But if not that, then Strickland's probably next. And if not Strickland, the winner of Whitaker and Chimaev, I think it's Whitaker. But he already beat Whitaker relatively soon. I mean, it was pretty recent. It was by knockout, so I'd much rather see the Strickland fight if Whitaker wins. So there's that impressive win by DDP. I thought it was a good fight. And again, aside from maybe Rosenstruck Tuivasa, I think every fight on this card was worth watching. Go out of your way to see DDP Adesanya. I give it a 4 out of 5. Good fight, great finish. And overall, I thought it was a really fun card. Again, main card. I'm not looking at anything else. Good card. Next, I think, is the Sphere. Mexican Independence Day. I'm not crazy about the card, to be honest. Maybe 2 or 3 good fights. Everything else is kind of a bit weak. I'll just be honest here. But we'll see if I actually end up releasing my predictions. Who knows? We'll see. But with that being said, I'm going to log off now, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.